In a quiet town, a routine traffic stop takes a dark and unexpected turn. When a young black teen, just trying to get home, finds himself at the mercy of a racist cop, things quickly escalate. The cop's cruelty is unprovoked, leaving the teen bruised and helpless on the side of the road. But what the officer doesn't know is that this is no ordinary teenager. This boy's brother is a man feared by many, a ruthless assassin who will stop at nothing to protect his family. Word spreads fast, and soon the cop finds himself facing the wrath of the teen's older brother, a shadowy figure with a reputation that precedes him. As tensions rise, the cop's life hangs in the balance. Will the assassin's vengeance bring justice, or will it spiral out of control? The story that begins with an unjust attack becomes a chilling tale of revenge, family loyalty, and the fight for what's right. But as the two men close in on each other, no one can predict how far things will go. Will the cop survive the assassin's wrath, or is he about to meet his end in a storm of fury? Stay tuned. This story is far from over. The cop, Officer Harris, had always prided himself on his authority. He was known around town as someone who didn't hesitate to take control, especially when dealing with people he considered trouble. That evening, when he pulled over the teen, Jamal, for a minor infraction, he saw an opportunity to assert his dominance. What started with a simple question quickly turned into something much darker. Harris didn't just write a ticket, he used his position to intimidate, pushing Jamal to the edge. Jamal, scared but trying to stay calm, had no idea that his older brother, Malik, was watching from a distance. Malik, a man with a past that made even the most hardened criminals nervous, had been keeping an eye on his younger brother ever since he came to town. He had retired from his deadly line of work for years, but family meant everything to him. The news of Jamal's mistreatment sent a cold shiver down his spine. Malik's reputation was built on swift, merciless action, and there was no way he'd let this cop get away with what he'd done. As the night fell, Malik's plans began to take shape. The tension was rising, but so was the uncertainty. What would Malik do when he finally found Harris? Would vengeance be enough, or would it spark something far worse? The clock was ticking, and everyone knew it. The city seemed to hold its breath as Malik moved through the shadows, every step calculated, every movement deliberate. His mind was consumed by the thought of his brother, Jamal, and the pain he'd suffered. But it wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a message. Officer Harris had crossed a line, and Malik wasn't the type to let that go unpunished. But as he tracked the officer's routine, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. This wasn't going to be as simple as confronting Harris. It never was. Meanwhile, Officer Harris was beginning to realize that something wasn't right. He had received some anonymous warnings, threats, really. The fear in those messages was palpable. But Harris dismissed them at first, thinking they were just the ramblings of someone trying to get under his skin. But as the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The threat was real. He knew Jamal had family, but he hadn't considered how dangerous that family might be. In a small apartment a few blocks away, Jamal was struggling to process what had happened. The physical bruises would fade, but the emotional scars ran deeper. He had been humiliated, hurt in ways he hadn't expected. His anger was building, but he felt helpless. It was hard to reconcile the quiet, peaceful world he once knew with the chaos that was now rapidly closing in around him. The tension between these two worlds was palpable, and the more they spiraled, the clearer it became that this conflict wouldn't end quietly. Would Malik be able to control this desire for justice, or would he unleash something far more dangerous? Would Harris ever realize the monster he had awakened? As the story unfolded, it became clear that the stakes were higher than anyone had anticipated. The night was thick with anticipation. Malik's every move was precise, each step bringing him closer to the reckoning he knew was inevitable. He had been tracking Officer Harris for days, studying his habits, watching his every turn. But as the moment drew closer, a sense of unease gnawed at him. Something didn't sit right. He could feel the walls closing in, but he didn't dare stop. This was bigger than him. It was about family, about standing up for what was right. Officer Harris, on the other hand, was unraveling. The relentless threats had finally gotten to him. He wasn't just afraid, he was paranoid. Every corner he turned, he felt eyes on him. His confidence was slipping away, replaced by fear. He started making mistakes. His patrol route was erratic, his decisions impulsive. The once certain officer now found himself questioning every sound, every movement. Was it Malik, or was it just his mind playing tricks? Back at home, Jamal was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. He couldn't shake the image of the cop's face, the harsh words, the fear in his mother's eyes when she saw him return home bruised and broken. But he also felt something else, guilt. He didn't want Malik to get caught up in his fight. He never asked for this, never wanted his brother to come out of the shadows. Yet with each passing hour, the inevitability of it all pressed down on him. The city was holding its breath. As Malik closed in on Harris' location, everything seemed to converge at once. The night was electric with tension, both men moving unknowingly toward the same dangerous confrontation. And as the seconds ticked by, it became clear that whatever happened next would change everything, for better or for worse. As the night dragged on, the tension reached a boiling point. Malik had found his way to Harris's usual hangout, a dimly lit bar on the edge of town where the cop often went to unwind after his shifts. Malik stood across the street, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. His grip tightened on the weapon in his jacket, his eyes focused on the door, where Officer Harris was just about to step out. The final confrontation was moments away, and the world seemed to stop, the air thick with suspense. But just as Malik took a step forward, something unexpected happened. A car screeched to a halt behind him, and before he could react, a man stepped out. Malik froze. The man was unfamiliar, but the presence was unmistakable. A voice, low and threatening, called out to him. "You think this is just about you, huh?" It was his old associate, Victor. Malik's past was catching up with him. Victor had been a key player in the network Malik once belonged to, a network full of dangerous people with their own agendas. Malik had left all of that behind, but it seemed like his past wasn't done with him yet. Victor's eyes gleamed with malice as he stepped closer. "You've been a ghost for years, Malik, but you're not the only one with unfinished business. Harris doesn't belong to you anymore." Malik's heart raced. What did Victor mean? Had Harris been targeted by others too? Was his plan about to backfire completely? The stakes had just been raised, and everything Malik thought he knew about this fight was now in jeopardy. Harris was no longer just a man who had wronged Jamal. He was part of something far bigger, something Malik had no idea he was walking straight into. The weight of it all was suffocating. Malik had to act fast, but with his own past now rearing its ugly head, he couldn't help but wonder, who was really pulling the strings here? And was he ready to face what was coming next? The time for decisions had arrived, and with every passing second, the danger escalated beyond his control. Malik's pulse thundered in his ears as Victor's words sank in. The past had come alive in a way he never expected. His thoughts raced. Victor wasn't here by accident. This was a setup. The whole plan had been compromised. The last thing he wanted was to get dragged back into the underworld, but it seemed that was exactly where this was headed. With Victor closing in, Malik had no choice but to stay one step ahead. He ducked behind a nearby car, trying to stay out of sight while his mind worked to process the sudden shift in the situation. The stakes were higher than ever. He wasn't just fighting for justice for Jamal anymore. He was caught in a deadly game between forces far more powerful than he could have imagined. As Malik readied himself to confront Victor, a sudden noise behind him caught his attention. His heart skipped a beat. There, standing at the edge of the alley, was Officer Harris. The cop had clearly heard the commotion, and now fully aware of Malik's presence, stepped forward. His face was a mask of fear, but there was something else there, too: resignation. "Malik," Harris said, his voice trembling. This isn't what you think. There's more to this than you know." Before Malik could respond, Victor lunged at him, a blade in his hand. The fight was swift, brutal, and in those fleeting moments, everything seemed to blur. Malik's mind screamed for him to focus, to finish this, and get out before things went too far. He fought with the instinct of someone who had lived through worse, disarming Victor and sending him crashing to the ground.